You learn grief the way you learn geography, by being forced to map a horizon you never asked for. 2 months ago, I watched my husband Jack die in a hospice room that smelled like stale coffee and flowers no one watered. Yesterday, I signed the paperwork for my son Timmy's cremation. Today, the house is too quiet for the clocks, and every surface keeps a small echo of the people who used to live here. A superhero cape over a chair, Jack's tools in a box that still smells faintly of motor oil, the dent in the couch where Timmy would dive for cartoons on Saturday mornings. I schedule the funeral the way you set a stubborn appointment with fate. Bright, unambiguous, on a Saturday, because Saturdays were his favorite. He loved the sunlight, the way it made his hair look like it belonged to a cartoon hero and not a 12-year-old with a terminal diagnosis. He wanted bright days. I wanted to honor that with a day that could hold him. Then Abigail texts me about a housewarming party on the same Saturday. Abigail, my sister, who moved 3 towns over into a house she calls finally ours, who posts photos of throw pillows like they are small victories, writes open house with 3 exclamation points. At first, I think it's a mistake, a calendar clash. I call her because somehow calling is still less raw than answering the buzzing in my chest. She picks up, and that voice, the one that used to braid my hair when we were kids and still has the same certain inflection when she's making a plan, tells me she's having people over that day. Her tone is light, like she's arranging brunch. I tell her about the funeral. I say Timmy's name out loud, and it sounds like a thing that should be illegal to say in casual conversation. I tell her it's Saturday. I tell her it's bright. I tell her it's what he would have wanted. For a moment, I can hear a pause on the line, enough for me to hear my own breath. Then Abigail says, plainly, it's a private event. Like the word private can shrink my grief into a polite footnote. Like that makes it okay. She says funerals are intimate and she's sorry, but the housewarming has been on the calendar for weeks and she can't move it. She even says, as if adding sugar to a wound, that since it's private, there really isn't a conflict at all. What's at stake isn't logistics. It's a tiny, carved-out piece of the world where I can put Timmy down without being asked to smile for a new couch. It's the one Saturday that won't be colonized by new upholstery or the clinking of champagne flutes where his empty chair will have to sit in silence. It's a promise I made to myself to keep his day bright, not turned into someone else's backdrop. I feel the heat behind my ribs. Something heavy and animal and tired starts to rise. I should have hung up. I should have breathed. Instead, I drive to her new house because grief is a poor decision maker and because I need to measure the audacity of her timing in person. I stand on Abigail's porch with the sunlight making a halo over everything she's so excited about, and when I tell her face to face, voice rough as gravel, that Timmy's funeral is that Saturday, I expect condolence or confusion or even anger. What I don't expect is the casual shrug she gives, as if my life is a minor inconvenience to her new, curated happiness. She says it again. It's private, Mads. It shouldn't be a problem. Something in me that has been splitting into pieces these last 8 weeks stitches itself into a thread of fury. I am so tired of being invisible in places where their normal lives continue. I am so tired of being asked to be small so others can be comfortable. My hands remember how to hold a hammer for Jack's projects. My mouth, apparently, remembers how to use words like weapons. I go into Abigail's house and sit down because the floorboards are the only thing steady beneath me, and then I do what I shouldn't. What I say after that, the words that come out like shards, I don't even remember perfectly. I know they landed. I know they were sharp enough to leave marks. I know that when I finally stop, Abigail's face is the color of someone who has been hit by a train she didn't see coming. She leaves the room that is supposed to be hers. I sit alone in the light that Timmy would have loved, and the moment hangs there, too bright and too still, waiting for whatever will come next. I remember the sound of my own voice like a stranger's tape recording. Too loud, too fast, full of things I didn't intend to catalog into the air. I don't remember the exact sentences. Memory after grief is like a scratched vinyl where the needle jumps. What I do know is the temperature of the words. They were cold and heavy and cut in places I didn't know needed cutting. I said things about Abigail's life being a parade she'd decided to hold on my children's graves. I said things about how she'd always chosen the comfortable things while other people carried the heavy ones. I said things about how she never called except when she needed a favor. I said, and this is the part that claws me later, that she acted like loss was an accessory she didn't have to wear. Her face changed as if someone had swapped the lighting in the room. The bright paint of her living room did nothing for it. The halo of sun through the bay window only showed the shock in sharper relief. She stood up like someone answering the coldness I'd thrown had actually hit her, and she left. She left her own house, walked to the street and climbed into her car while I sat there with the echo of whatever I'd unloosed. The door closed behind her, and the house hummed with the sound of my breathing and the faint sound of a playlist she'd clearly meant to be cheerful. The irony cut me more than the words had cut her. She'd left because my grief made her uncomfortable in the place she'd been proudest to claim. Then the stillness came down like a second blanket. I sat on her sofa and tried to stitch myself back together, but the thread kept slipping. I held my phone and scrolled through messages that were useless. All the condolences, all the I'm so sorries. And none of them soothed the particular bruise I'd made in someone who used to know how to braid my hair. I thought about how quick anger is to show itself when grief eats patience away. I thought about how merciless words are. They remember themselves long after you forget their edges. After a while, the light in Abigail's living room lost its kind, forgiving brightness, and turned sharp and clinical. I stood up. My legs remembered home better than my head did. I walked out onto her porch, where the sunlight looked like the same sunlight Jack had loved and Timmy would have loved, and I felt stupid and small and feral all at once. I didn't wait for Abigail to come back. I didn't wait for an apology or a reason. Grief had already taught me that waiting collects nothing but more hurt. I drove home with my hands white-knuckled on the wheel. At my kitchen table, I sat with a mug of coffee I couldn't drink, and Timmy's little cape folded on my lap like a damp piece of memory. I laid my head on the table and let the sound of the house, the creak of a door, the refrigerator's low sigh, fill the space that used to vibrate with two lives. I cried until the sobs were spent, and then I cried some more that felt less like water and more like something being pulled out of me. When I finally stood, the house smelled like motor oil and laundry and the faint sweetness of the day. Sunlight through curtains, something ordinary and impossible to hold. I told myself I'd call Abigail. I promised a lot of things to the empty rooms. Instead, I unpacked the grief into small tasks, folded laundry into neat piles, set Timmy's cape on the back of a chair, and waited for the part of me that could be reasonable to come home. Abigail and I do the thing people do at funerals where words feel both necessary and useless. We stand near each other, hand on the small of a back, eyes rimmed red, and trade the same handful of sentences. I'm so sorry. He was brave. We'll miss him. She's with a couple of friends who hover politely, the way polite people hover around hot coals. She looks small in a black dress that had probably cost more anxiety than she needed to spend. The color on her makes her face look washed, like someone who's been trying on sorrow and found it ill-fitting. The service is quiet and bright, exactly like Timmy wanted. There are balloons, but not too many. Someone reads something about cartoons and superheroes and the way children make big things of small kindnesses. I listen and feel the hollow sound grief makes when it passes through a room with other people, an echo that's neither solace nor punishment, just the shape of absence. Afterward, people cluster with casseroles and awkward smiles. Abigail walks up and, this part surprises me with how adult it is, she apologizes without flinching. Not the clumsy, distracted sorry I'd gotten over the phone earlier, but a soft, full apology that owns the mismatch between her life's timing and mine. She says she moved the housewarming because it was the right thing to do, because family matters more than throw pillows. She says she'll hold a moment for Timmy at her postponed housewarming next week. A candle, a brief toast, and she asks if there's anything I need from her. She means it. I can tell. I don't know what to say. My mouth has been storing shock and shaking it out in private, and now there's nothing staged left to perform. I let the wordless thing I've been carrying, all the small, obstinate grief and anger, go as a ragged sound, and she takes it with me. We cry together, the kind of crying that doesn't need invention. For a flicker, I feel something that is almost like relief. Not because what happened is fixed, but because a bridge didn't burn completely. It smoldered and someone brought water. Later, when the house empties and the sunlight is close enough to touch but no less honest, I learn something that rearranges the map of my days again. I find the news alone, because that's what these things have become. Private tremors discovered in the quiet. I am pregnant. The test is a little rectangle that looks affronted to be making history in my bathroom. I hold it, and the house, which knows the outlines of Jack and Timmy better than any architect, whispers around me with the memory of them. I am pregnant. I think of Jack's hands, how steady they were with wrenches and with me. I think of Timmy's laugh, how it lived in corners and on Saturdays. I think of mornings that will come and the particular kind of quiet they will hold. A child who will never meet the man who started the family I'm now trying to keep breathing. Now, the sentence breaks differently in my chest. I am both undone and arranged. I am terrified with an animal's clarity and twice as stubborn as I was yesterday. I am going to have this child. I will tell Abigail, and she will be there in some imperfect human way. I will learn how to parent in a house heavy with ghosts and bright with things they loved. I will teach a small person how to make Saturdays mean sunlight and cartoons, and bravery that isn't measured by years. I breathe, and the air is too big for me, and I hold on anyway.